Margot Friedländer, one of the last survivors of the Holocaust, has died at the age of 103. Friedländer is seen here receiving one of her many peace prizes just last month. She was born in Berlin in 1921 to a Jewish family. In 1944, she was transported to Theresienstadt concentration camp. Her parents and brother were murdered in other Nazi death camps. After World War II, Friedländer lived for over 60 years in New York before returning to Berlin in her late 80s and reclaiming her German citizenship. She dedicated her final decades to educating young people about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Today, Margot Friedländer had been due to receive one of Germany's highest honors, the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit. I want to bring in our political correspondent now, Simon Young. Simon, very sad news of the passing of Ms. Friedländer just one day after the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War here in Europe. What more can you tell us about her and her life?
Yeah, Brent, Margot Friedländer was one of the most striking and memorable voices, speaking with authenticity and knowledge about her own personal experiences of the crimes of the Nazis. And she was in hiding while the Holocaust was going on, but she was betrayed. And as you mentioned, she was sent to Theresienstadt concentration camp. The rest of her family were murdered in the camps, and it was only much later that she started to talk publicly and write about what she'd experienced. And she set up a foundation that carries her name, and its purpose is to continue her legacy and spread a message of humanity and tolerance, freedom and democracy. And I think that's what she was all about. That's what people are remembering tonight.
And after the war, she spent most of her adult life in the United States, but then she returned to Germany in her 80s. What made her decide to come back and to reclaim her German citizenship?
Yeah, she was 88 when she came back to Berlin from America, back to the city where she was born. And indeed, she reassumed German nationality. And I think it was simply that desire to pass on her first-hand testimony, stories of wrongs done to her, but also stories about people who helped. And I think it's a common phenomenon among those who lived through those times and faced that kind of persecution, that immediately after the war they found it difficult to talk about these things. But some of them, like Margot Friedländer, much later felt there was a really important task there to communicate what they know. And she travelled the country, travelled around Germany, speaking to schools, and I think many school children listened to her in rapt silence, by all accounts. She was a really tireless campaigner, warning indeed of the dangers of anything like what happened under the Nazis happening in the future.
Yeah, she had such a generous spirit. I know as a Holocaust survivor, she often said that she spoke for those who could no longer speak, not just for the 6 million Jews who were killed, but for all of the innocent people who were killed in the Second World War. Why was she such an important figure for post-war Germany?
Well, I think, people just paid attention. President Steinmeier this evening called her, said that she'd given the gift of reconciliation to Germany. And Chancellor Merz called her one of the strongest voices of our time. That just gives you a sort of flavour of how people thought she was important. I think it was that warm-hearted way that she spoke to young people in particular and explained her story in an intelligible way. For many people, I think, in Germany, she was a kind of a celebrity. Just yesterday, a German friend of mine said that she'd seen her at an event recently and, was dumbstruck, couldn't think of anything to say, but just held the door open for her. That's the kind of status she had. And she was also relevant, of course, because she was warning against the rising anti-Semitism that we've seen in recent years in Germany again, and said, how disappointed she was to see that.
Yeah, there'll be a documentary here on DW in about an hour's time from now on the life of Margot Friedländer, who died today at the age of 103. May her memory be a blessing. Simon, thank you.